If you're upgrading from 5.2 to 5.3, we're just running MS build and telling it to build the solution as a development editor with the Win64 platform. That won't work in 5.3 anymore. It will like build half your project. So Failure Friday, Jenkins edition. I did want to kind of just like give like a brief tutorial on like how we set up Jenkins because I think it's pretty awesome. And I think like if you're using plastic, this is definitely the way to go. But the biggest thing that I wanted to address was just this command. If you're upgrading from 5.2 to 5.3, so this was our old command for 5.2. Basically, we're just running MS build and telling it to build the solution as a development editor with the Win64 platform. That won't work in 5.3 anymore. It will like build half your project. So huge shout out to Pratik. He figured this out that you need to run the build.bat file in the engine source code, and you need to build your game module and your editor module for the Windows 64 development platform. You also need to pass in the directory to your actual project. And that will kind of resolve pretty much every issue that I was running into with Jenkins. There's a lot of things, if you're using Redpoint, EOS, and stuff like that, you'll need to make sure that you update your EOS SDK and a lot of things like that. But that'll take a long time for me to go through, so I'll probably push that to another video if we want to go over it. So I did want to kind of just go over what Jenkins is and some of the best ways to set it up. Specifically, if you're using plastic SCM. So first off, for those who don't know, like Jenkins is a CI/CD platform, a really good tool for DevOps that allows a development team to implement continuous integration, continuous deployment, basically making sure that any check-ins or code changes made to your plastic repo get implemented properly and then deployed to your users. So initially our first setup, when we first designed this, we were using a freestyle project that pulled a specific branch, right? So in this case, it was main development. Every time we merged into main development, that triggered a build that uploaded it to Seam and EGS, built all of our servers, everything like that. But we did come up with the idea that we wanted each of our own developers to have their own sort of sandbox for QA testing. And that had to kind of change everything. So just to kind of go over the difference between a freestyle and a pipeline project. A freestyle project, actually, so the best way I can compare this is it's if you're used to Unreal Engine, it's similar to Blueprints versus C++, right? So a freestyle project is going to give you a very straightforward template based off of all of the different things that your plugins allow you to do. So you really just have to fill in a couple boxes, right? You add a build step, fill in, whatever build step you need to do to execute a batch command, shell, all that kind of stuff. Type it in. You have your post build actions. You have your, plastic selectors, your git selectors, all that kind of stuff. It's really GUI centric. Everything you do is done in a GUI. And that's really awesome until you need to go in deeper and start to kind of develop your own pipeline system. So to give you kind of an example of what we're doing, it was just this, right? Our selector would check for changes to main development using the repository that we passed through. And then our build would kick off, it would execute all of our steps, and we are good to go. What we decided to do different this time was to use labels to where each one of our developers has a label, and then that label determines which build goes through to which branch. The problem with using a default selector, that would mean that every developer has to be working on the same branch, which is not as efficient as it could be. Typically, what we wanted to do was to create a new branch for each feature that we're working on. And in order to do that, we would have to manually go in, create a freestyle project for every developer and then change their branch after a developer, say, pinged me and said, hey, here's my new branch. That seems really, really inefficient because a large part of DevOps is just automation. So what we decided to do instead was to go with a pipeline project, which is essentially a Groovy file that kind of going back to that comparison to Blueprint to C++, you might be able to like buy a plugin that lets you do file IO in Unreal Engine, but writing it in C++ is going to give you full control over what happens in that pipeline. So essentially what we have here is our kind of messy Groovy file. And how that works, essentially I decided to use Python for this. Python has a very good PyPy repository specifically for Jenkins. So we have a custom polling script that will pull based off the pull time. When it detects a new change using the script get author, it will trigger a build job based off of the current queued change set. So the way that works, essentially each developer will create their label and apply their label to the change set that they're working on. The polling script will go and check this label list here to see if their current change set is different than their last change set. If it is, then it'll queue a build job. It'll increase their priority, which is basically used to make sure that everybody gets a fair shot at a build. I know like one thing I do, I like to iterate a lot. So I think I have something ridiculous like 90 different builds. My priority is like greater than 90. But for instance, if I had a build queued at the same time that our staging branch had a build queued, my build would continue to go because it does just go down the list. So this gives everybody the ability to have a fair shot at creating their build. So we go ahead and we get arguments from their change set comment and check their label. Once we've found that their label is successfully updated, then we go ahead and we queue a build job, and then that runs through the Jenkins pipeline and everything gets built and then deployed to Steam and EGS. And yeah, I mean, that is actually it. It's just a very in-depth and efficient way of making sure that every developer has the ability to build their own branch, upload it to their own sandbox and stuff like that. So I guess to go through the arguments, we do use dedicated servers, and we have the option to upload to the Epic Games Store. This system sort of covers all that. So if you add certain arguments to your change set, it's going to build it's going to update the polling script to do different things. So for instance, here, if we're not building a server, then we skip all these steps. If we are, then we have a lot of different batch files here that kind of work together to make sure that everything is uploaded and delivered to the proper location. And also, we have a lot of Slack integrations as well. And so, yeah.